Bill said to me once during a tough time, he goes, Sims, listen, don't worry. When you retire, the fans will like you.
Who walks in? Phil Sims. Phil Sims walks in and says, hey man, you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm amazed that when you see people like that that are champions in those kind of situations.
How good was Phil Sims? When Lawrence Taylor was asked that question, his answer was simple: football player's quarterback. When John Elway was asked about facing him in Super Bowl 21, he admitted one thing: he was in awe. The legend who booed Phil Sims on draft day watched him become so untouchable that decades later, the Giants wouldn't even let a rookie wear his number 11. So how does a guy fans rejected on sight turn into the quarterback that NFL legends still can't stop talking about? The year was 1979. The New York Giants were a disaster. They hadn't made the playoffs since 1964. 15 years of pure misery. The previous season ended with the miracle at the Meadowlands. A fumble so embarrassing it became a trauma that haunted the entire franchise. The fans had turned their pain into weapons. And on draft day, when the Giants called Phil Simms' name with the 7th overall pick, those fans erupted in boos. Phil Simms played at Morehead State, a school so small that most people in that room had never heard of it. The fans wanted a savior. They got a mystery wrapped in a blonde crew cut and a strong arm from Kentucky. That rejection became the foundation of everything Phil Simms would build. If you love these deep dives into old school football stories, do me a favor and use the hype feature to give this video some hype. It helps more than you know. Now let's keep going. Bill Parcells took over as head coach in 1983, and the first thing he did was test Phil Simms. He benched him. Parcells pulled Simms in favor of Scott Bruner, a backup who had no business starting. The message was clear: you're not owed anything, earn it back. Phil Simms almost left the franchise right there, but instead he swallowed his pride and went to work. When he got his job back, he returned with an edge. Parcells didn't coach with kindness. He coached with pressure. He believed comfort was the enemy of greatness. So he cranked up the heat in practice until games felt easy by comparison. And for Simms, that meant constant criticism. Parcells would break him down in film sessions, challenge him in front of teammates, and demand perfection on every single snap. But Parcells also gave him the ultimate compliment. He called Simms' commitment unwavering. In Parcells' world, that phrase meant more than talent. It meant you had subordinated your ego to the team's will. January 25, 1987. Super Bowl 21, the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. The entire narrative heading into that game was about John Elway. He was the golden boy, the rocket-armed scrambler who dragged the Broncos to the championship with sheer athleticism. Phil Simms was the other guy, the workman, the game manager for a great defense. Then the game started. And by the time it ended, Bill Parcells, a man who never gave out compliments lightly, said something that still echoes today. He called it the best game a quarterback has ever played. Phil Simms completed 22 of 25 passes, 88%, a Super Bowl record that has stood for decades. His passer rating was 150.9, which is nearly perfect. But here's the part people forget. 2 of his 3 incompletions hit receivers in the hands and were dropped. That means Simms made 24 correct throws out of 25 attempts. The Denver Broncos had a great defense. They had just shut down the Cleveland Browns in the AFC Championship. The Giants didn't hide Simms behind the run game. They trusted him to attack downfield. There was a flea flicker to Phil McConkey. There were laser throws into tight windows against zone coverage. This wasn't a quarterback being carried. This was a quarterback operating at the absolute peak of his powers. The Erhard-Perkins offensive system the Giants ran was brutal. It required Simms to memorize hundreds of play concepts, read the defense pre-snap, adjust the protection, and then to pick the right receiver on every single play. And he did it with 88% efficiency on the biggest stage in football. Number 5, Bill Walsh, the architect of the West Coast offense, the genius who built the San Francisco dynasty. He had a secret about Phil Simms that changes everything. Walsh planned to draft Phil Simms, not Joe Montana. In 1979, Walsh was in his first year as head coach of the 49ers. The team had no talent and no first-round pick because the previous regime had traded it away for O.J. Simpson. Walsh needed a quarterback who could run his new system, so he flew to Kentucky with assistant coach Sam Wyche to watch Phil Simms work out at Morehead State. Walsh saw 3 things in Simms that convinced him. First, a compact throwing motion. The ball came out fast, which was critical for the West Coast offense, where the quarterback had to release before the pass rush arrived. Second, functional mobility. Simms could roll out and throw on the run. Third, processing speed. Walsh believed Simms had the brain to handle the complex reads his system demanded. Walsh later told writer Peter King something stunning. Not to take anything from Joe, but I know Phil could have done the things in our offense that Joe did. That's Bill Walsh saying Phil Simms could have been Joe Montana. Walsh's plan was to grab Simms in the second or third round, but the Giants shocked everyone and took Simms 7th overall in the first round. Walsh had to pivot. He waited until the end of the third round and took his backup plan, Joe Montana from Notre Dame. The tragedy here is the mismatch that followed. In New York, Simms played in a system that demanded 7-step drops and vertical routes. That exposed him to punishment and piled up injuries. In San Francisco, the quick rhythm passing game would have protected him. Number 4, Harry Carson, Hall of Fame linebacker, captain of the Giants defense, the moral compass of the franchise. Carson called Phil Simms the emotional anchor of the offense, and coming from Harry Carson, that means everything. The 1980s Giants defense was a wrecking crew. They had Lawrence Taylor, they had George Martin, they had Carl Banks. These guys viewed opponents with disdain and their own offense with skepticism. For a quarterback to lead that team, he couldn't just be smart. He had to be a warrior. Carson said Simms earned the respect of the defense because he was just as tough as they were. Giants practices in the 80s were violent. The defense would attack their own teammates with the same intensity they brought to games. A softer quarterback would have crumbled. Simms didn't. He chirped back at linebackers. He took hits in practice and got up without complaining. He matched their energy. Carson said the Giants had 3 true captains: himself, Simms, and George Martin. That triumvirate governed the locker room. Before Super Bowl 21, Bill Parcells sent Harry Carson out to midfield for the coin toss alone. Carson described it as one of the coolest feelings of his life, but the fact that Simms accepted that decision without ego tells you everything about his leadership. He knew the Giants' identity was defensive. He didn't need the ceremonial spotlight. Carson's endorsement protected Simms from the internal mutinies that destroyed other teams. When the defense yelled at the offense to score points, it wasn't an attack on Simms. It was a plea to their brother in arms. Number 3, Mark Ingram Sr., wide receiver who caught passes from Phil Simms. Ingram gave a scouting report on Simms that cuts to the core of his game. Everyone can see his release in his arm, but to me the greatest part was he has the guts to go along with all the natural stuff. The natural stuff was obvious. Simms stood 6'3" and weighed 215. He had a classic over-the-top delivery that generated ridiculous torque. In scouting circles, the 15-yard out route from the opposite hash is the test for NFL arm strength. Simms threw that route with ease. He could place the ball away from linebackers on tight window throws. But the guts part is what separated him. Ingram respected Simms because the risk was shared. He saw Simms stand tall in the pocket with his eyes downfield, even as pass rushers collapsed around him. A receiver won't run a dangerous route over the middle if he thinks the quarterback will bail out early or throw a hospital pass. Ingram knew Simms would wait until the last possible millisecond to throw, ensuring the route had time to break open, even if it meant Simms would get smashed into the turf. This toughness extended beyond the pocket. Simms would lower his shoulder on goal line sneaks. He would scramble for first downs in critical moments. For a skill player like Ingram, watching the franchise quarterback bleed and limp alongside the rest of the team created loyalty. Number 2, Lawrence Taylor, the greatest defensive player in NFL history, a force of pure destruction who changed the game forever. Taylor called Phil Simms a football player's quarterback, and to understand what that means, you have to understand how defensive players view quarterbacks. To someone like Lawrence Taylor, the word quarterback can be an insult. It implies a pampered athlete who wears a red jersey in practice. A football player's quarterback is different. It means physicality. He initiates contact instead of shying away. It means stoicism. He doesn't complain to referees after late hits. It means accountability. He owns his mistakes in the film room. Taylor and Simms understood the environment required to win in the NFC East, which Taylor described as pure hate. The division had the Buddy Ryan-led Philadelphia Eagles, who placed bounties on opponents. To prepare for that, Giants practices were legendary for their intensity. Lawrence Taylor would relentlessly heckle Simms. If Simms threw an interception, Taylor would remind him about it for days. But Simms never backed down. He would scream back at Taylor, challenging the greatest defensive player ever to do his job better. That adversarial relationship was critical. By facing Lawrence Taylor in practice, dealing with his speed and his trash talk and his fury, Simms was prepared for anything he would see on Sundays. If he could handle Taylor, he could handle Reggie White. The bond between Taylor and Simms resurfaced decades later, when rookie pass rusher Abdul Carter joined the Giants and requested to wear either number 11 or number 56. The Giants alumni network shut it down. Those numbers belong to Simms and Taylor, the two untouchable pillars of the franchise. Number 1, John Elway. the Golden Boy, the rocket-armed scrambler, the star entering Super Bowl 21. Elway admitted he was the main attraction heading into that game, but Phil Simms set a standard that became a talking point for decades. Elway and the Broncos legends watched Simms complete 88% of his passes and were left in awe. For an NFL quarterback, completing 88% against a scout team in practice is impressive. Doing it in the Super Bowl against a conference champion defense is almost incomprehensible. The second half of that game was a clinic. The Giants scored 30 points, a Super Bowl record at the time. During one stretch, Simms completed 10 consecutive passes. Elway, standing on the opposing sideline, watched a quarterback enter the zone, that psychological state where the game slows down and every decision is perfect. Elway threw for 304 yards in the game, more than Simms's 268, but Elway needed 37 attempts and threw an interception. Simms needed only 25 attempts for his 268 yards and 3 touchdowns, finishing with a 150.9 rating. Elway's awe was an acknowledgement that while he had to scramble and make miracles to move the ball, Simms was dissecting the defense with surgical precision. It was a lesson in the power of efficiency over improvisation. And then there's Jim Kelly, Hall of Fame quarterback for the Buffalo Bills. He ran the K-gun offense, a no-huddle fast break style that terrorized the league. Kelly held Simms in deep respect. He saw Simms as the ultimate obstacle to his own championship dreams. December 15, 1990. The Giants hosted the Bills in a brutal regular season game. Both starting quarterbacks were injured. Kelly suffered a knee injury. Simms suffered a severe foot fracture that ended his season. In the post-game coverage, broadcasters set up a split-screen interview between the two injured stars. Kelly looked at Simms and said, "Phil, I'll see you in the Super Bowl." That comment is loaded with meaning. Kelly viewed Simms as the final boss. He assumed the Giants would make the Super Bowl because Simms had built them into a machine. But Simms knew his foot was broken. He knew his season was over. The tragedy of Phil Simms's career is that he never got to play in Super Bowl 25. Backup Jeff Hostetler managed the game, but it was Simms who laid the foundation for that 13-3 season. Joe Montana, the face of the San Francisco dynasty. Montana eventually became close friends with Simms, but during their playing days, the relationship was defined by fear. Montana admitted that the 80s Giants were one of the few teams that truly scared opponents. The fear was physical. The Giants' defense knocked Montana unconscious in the 1986 playoffs and broke his hand and sternum in the 1990 NFC Championship. But Montana also noted the fear was tactical. Simms could capitalize on the opportunities the defense created. Montana knew that if Lawrence Taylor forced a turnover, Simms had the killer instinct to turn it into a touchdown. The tension between the Giants and Niners is best shown by what happened after a Monday Night Football game in 1990. At midfield, Simms and Ronnie Lott got into a heated face mask-to-face mask-shouting match that had to be broken up by teammates. Ronnie Lott was the 49ers' terrifying safety, a man who once amputated his own finger to stay in a game. That Phil Simms was willing to stand toe-to-toe with Ronnie Lott shows the pure hate environment he thrived in. When you synthesize all these voices, Bill Parcells, Bill Walsh, Harry Carson, Mark Ingram, Lawrence Taylor, John Elway, Jim Kelly, and Joe Montana, a clear portrait emerges. Phil Simms was the indispensable man of the New York Giants. To the coaches, he was the perfect instrument. For Parcells, the tough-as-nails executor. For Walsh, the brilliant what-if. To his teammates, he was the anchor. For Carson and Taylor, the one offensive player who matched their intensity. For Ingram, the gut check leader who took hits so others could shine. To his rivals, he was the inevitable force. For Elway, Kelly, and Montana, he was the efficient, terrifyingly competent operator of a machine that could not be stopped. The true measure of his greatness is found in the awe of John Elway watching 22 of 25 passes hit their target, in the respect of Lawrence Taylor after brutal practices, and in the confession of Bill Walsh that he wanted Simms to be the heir to his kingdom. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and drop a comment letting me know which Legends take surprised you most.